Hello again, everybody. It's been a while, but I am back this week with episode 12, I believe it is. Even though it's been a long break, I do have that noted of Sabres Chat presented by Built in Buffalo. I am your host, Luca. It feels good to be back. A lot has happened in my personal life over the off time here. And I'm not going to get into that, of course, but it was fun. It was also a nice little bit of a breather, but I was itching to get back. Not a lot was going on in hockey beyond the playoffs and everything, which I did sit back and enjoy. Congratulations to the Vegas Golden Knights. I even made a tweet. You can have your feelings about Eichel and all that stuff, but then again, seeing an expansion team only 6 years later lift the cup, it is cool in my opinion. I think it's nice. I personally don't mind it at all. And as just in a hockey perspective, they absolutely deserved it. They were a phenomenal team who did a great job and got things done. Good on them. But I'm not going to sit here and just talk about the playoffs and things like that and all that stuff. Of course, as I'm recording this tonight, this is Wednesday night, very late Wednesday night. The first round of the NHL draft had already taken place. Connor Bedard, of course, went first overall to Chicago, but that's not what we're here to sit and talk about. The Sabres did, in fact, keep their pick, and I'm just going to jump right into it here. They stayed pat at 13. There were a little bit of rumblings out there. Apparently, Kevin Adams was on the open floor of the draft floor talking to the brass of the Vancouver Canucks, who were sitting at 11 when pick 10 was transpiring. I can't remember who was pick 10 off the top of my head here. And it was kind of picking up steam a little bit on Twitter and just kind of out there that there was potential. Maybe they were moving up. If they were moving up, they're trying to secure their guy. They end up standing pat. I will say Vancouver ended up drafting defensemen that I kind of had my eyes on. Um, Good on them. But then overall, with the Sabres sitting at 13, they end up drafting forward Zach Benson. And as a prospect, and I just want to start this as a prospect. There's no negative here. I just want to start. I do like him as a prospect. I like the ceiling of him in the NHL draft. To me, when you get outside of, say, um, the top five, we'll go with. I do believe where you just draft best available. You don't concern yourself with restocking the talent pool, what you need to do. That's for the later round. So say once tomorrow comes and it's in the second round, that is probably something where I think the Sabres are a little thin at defense right now when it comes to their prospect pool. And I wouldn't be shocked to see them take the best defenseman available with their second round pick if they, feel like they want to be drafting it. Maybe they use it in a move. You still have time for that, of course, but that's when I think you address more things like that. On day one, you really just kind of draft best player available, at least what you have on your board. There were a couple picks today where I felt maybe that wasn't the case. Of course, the Ducks not taking Fantilli at 2 and him falling to 3. I feel like it's a general consensus that Fantilli was the second best player in this draft, just behind Connor Bedard. But overall, those top 5 picks, you kind of have a lot of elite talent, and it's really nitpicky to me. Connor Bedard is above the rest, and it would have been insane to see Chicago not take him. But then after that, maybe there was just a guy you fell in love with more. That is the best player available to you, in your opinion. And then if there was just a defenseman there that you felt like could make an instant impact for you now and in the future, maybe you did that instead of the forward. That's where those decisions start coming in. Once you get outside the top 5, though, you really just start going best player available because you're not really anticipating those guys being ready the first and most likely even second year after being drafted. They're probably still working on development. Maybe you sign them on an entry level deal after the first year because you want to get them kind of AHL or pro level hockey played so that they can get accustomed to the pro game rather than just still in the juniors or college or wherever they were previously, and so on and so forth. So with that, going back to it, Zach Benson, Love him as a prospect. He's extremely exciting. There is just jaw-dropping tape with him and everything like that. The big thing that I like to do is kind of look at a lot of the pre-draft stories and coverage and things like that, and kind of pick words that seem to pop up time and time again, no matter who the writer is and everything like that. And the words out there that I kept seeing repeated and just was just constantly following him no matter who was discussing him was versatile, creative, and the most common word I saw out there was motor, and high motor for that matter. I mean, I said word, so I just kept it to motor, but high motor. And that's great. That fits everything in the ideology of this team and how Kevin Adams has been trying to build this team, and just yet another forward piece that could develop into something hopefully one day to be brought up, most likely, that fits the mold and style of hockey that they're trying to achieve on the Sabres. And I love everything about that. The motor aspect too, for me, like in today's game, you got to have a high motor. You look at Vegas, every line was coming out there and just churning out minutes. And it was just all about high motor, high press, forecheck. Make sure you stay on guys. Do not give them breathing room. Do not sit back. Don't sit in a formation and you're inside your own blue line. You just constant pressure, constant pressure. You need energy, everything like that. This guy seems to fit that bill. But with that high motor, what is incredible about Zach Benson is the fact that he is, no matter where he is on the ice, it seems like you hear a lot and see a lot with him is offensive chance is always on his mind. How can he move this puck, or, whether it's on his stick or move it to someone else to then create an offensive opportunity, even from back inside his own blue line or in the neutral zone. He is offensive minded, no off switch to his motor, just so much high end, high ceiling talent right there with this guy, that when you take that and then you look at his stats, both last season with 36 goals, 62 assists for 98 points in 60 games, and then the season before that with 25 goals, 38 assists, 63 points in 58 games. That's incredibly impressive and almost impossible to pass up there when a guy of that caliber is sitting at 13. I think Kevin Adams did a great job with this. If I had to do the typical draft grade letter for this pick, I would give it a B plus. I think it's very well done. I'm not going to give it a quite an A. I don't think it's like slam dunk. It's not like someone really fell. It's not like I'm gonna butcher his name right now, but Mitchkev fell all the way to him, and it's just like you have to take him. And then it's like, not only did you make the best player pick possible, but then also it's like an extreme top 5 pick talent fell all the way into your lap. Props to Danny Briere and the Flyers. I sent a tweet out about that. Love, love, love that pick for them. But overall, like the pick a lot. B plus seems like a good spot. Great value at pick 13. Very, very well done. The only other thing I want to address with the draft really is, and I'll be really quick with this, but on Twitter, when just kind of giving my quick hit thoughts before then kind of getting ready for this show tonight and whatnot, I made a comment where I just basically said he is a touch undersized. And when I say a touch undersized, I'm not calling him small. He is a touch undersized compared to the average NHL player, just to the average player in general, things like that. It's not like he's ridiculously undersized. He's 5'10" or around 170 pounds. He's not the biggest guy, that's for sure, but he's not, tiny. Like, he's not. Everyone likes to point out Matt Savoy, his line mate as well, by the way, from Winnipeg, who is only 5'9". But the funny part is, and this is the point I'm going to bring up here, is the Sabres recently, since 2021, and all the forwards in the first round that they have drafted, no one's been taller than 6 foot. And the heaviest weight has been 179 pounds at the time of drafted. Where I think it's a little funny is Matt Savoy is that 179 pounds. He is the shortest and yet the heaviest. And I say that in all the reasons because I'm sure it is, pure athletic heavy, but the heaviest of the 4 examples, now 5 examples, actually, if I include Benson, where it's like they're slightly undersized, but at the same time, it's like that's not end all be all. It was just a comment I made where it's like, they are slightly undersized. They're not a 6'3" guy like Wood that was just drafted today by the Preds. 6'3", I think he was like 210 out of UConn. And naturally, of course, due to UConn and being a little bit on the larger side with a hard, heavy shot, he's drawing comparisons to Tage Thompson. He's not quite 6'7", 6'6", 6'7", and so on and so forth. But regardless, the natural comparisons that people love to make was there and it made sense. But it's just something of note. And the reason I bring it up, and again, let me just list it out for you. Since 2021, Isaac Rosen, 14th overall, 5'11", 174 pounds. Matt Savoy, 5'9", 179 pounds, 9th overall in 2022. The 16th overall pick in 2022 was Noah Osland. Hopefully I'm saying that right. 5'11", 163 pounds. So slender at 5'11" comparative to the other couple guys. Yuri Kulich, 28th overall in 2022 as well. He is the only guy that then hit the 6-foot mark at 179 pounds. Yuri Kulich is already kind of looked a lot bigger than when you would see him when we had drafted him when he was playing with the Amherst. It's clear that he's definitely a bigger guy, even at 6 foot. And again, someone on Twitter, sorry for no credit here. I do apologize. I don't have it in front of me. He even said that Benson plays bigger than he's listed. There are plenty of guys like that. I think, Noah Osland is also one of those kind of guys that's working on trying to build up his frame. And that comes with a lot of prospects. It's just something of note that there's this history and track record now that the Sabres in the first round are taking forwards that you would consider to be a touch undersized. And I'm not saying it's like heavy. It's not like they're all 5'8", 5'9", and only 160 to 170 pounds. Like they're not all that, you have 5'11", 5'10", almost 180 pounds, so on and so forth. Where I bring this up and why I bring this up is the Sabres current roster. One thing that we noted was it seemed a little bit small or played small at times. And it's like you only have got 5 players over 6'1" or over, or no, I think it's technically truly over 6'1" because guy like Casey Middlestat is 6'1". He plays definitely smaller than that in my opinion, but he plays perfectly for what he is. And I think he plays well in his frame. That's not the conversation we're having here. And if you're developing all of these guys and you have a bunch of a touch undersized guys in your system and you're just kind of developing and bring them in and so on and so forth and just going through the system, if size is something that you would think is needed to be brought into this roster, when is that going to come? Because it's not going to be clearly from all of these guys that you're developing and drafting recently with those high end blue chip picks. Where is that going to come? And I do believe there's no such thing as too much talent in the talent pool. There's no such thing as too much talent in the system. But with that said, now that you keep stockpiling these high end, high skill talents that are kind of in a weird way a little bit similar, I'm not saying they're exactly the same, but they're similar just based on their build and skill sets and everything like that. It's like maybe now certain individuals, whether it's Osland, whether it's Rosen, whether it's Kulich, whether it's Savoy, whether it does become Benson, becomes expendable in a package or something like that to then acquire something for this current roster that we currently have to then give them something different when it comes to that size, or maybe even on the defensive side where also size is probably something they could use, or at least physicality, we'll call it, just because they are not the most overly physical defensive core. It's just something to note. It's something to say. It's not a criticism. It's not a knock on Benson. Again, one last time, I like the pick a lot. I think he's a great talent. I think the value at 13 was incredible for a guy like Benson. I have no qualms with the pick as a prospect and everything like that. I just think bringing in another guy that you could say is a touch undersized is just something to note when it comes to not all of these guys are going to, not Rosen, Savoy, Osland, Kulich, and Benson. It's pretty safe to assume that not all of them are going to play for the Sabres in their career. So you just keep stockpiling these guys because eventually, some of these high end talents could be used as a piece to then move and acquire something else that this team desperately needs now to not only just get over the hump of playoffs, but even compete in the playoffs and get moving forward back to winning ways and hopefully making pushes deeper into the playoffs as seasons come and go. So just something of note. It wasn't a criticism once more and everything like that. Loved the draft. Loved everything about it. Thought the ESPN coverage was, um a little, how do I put this lightly? Dry and cheeky at times in a bad way and just a little off. I wasn't fond of it. Not surprising. I do think ESPN's coverage lacks a little bit, when they're actually showing games as well. So I'm not overly surprised. It's a shame because I do like individuals such as Kevin Weeks and John Bruchagras. But then you add in some of the other individuals, and I just think it gets lost in the shuffle at times. And even it's just not the product I really would enjoy. I do think the NHL as a whole kind of drops the ball a little bit. I thought the NHL awards earlier this week were just not that great and borderline unwatchable. It's just not that I really care about that stuff anyways, but I do think that there's a lot to improve in those realms, and I think ESPN should look to do that themselves. With that in mind, we talked about the draft and everything like that. But the other thing I want to get into tonight or today, if you're listening to this on Thursday, thank you for watching and stopping by. But the other thing I want to get into, due to us being on the eve that is this event, that would be free agency. And free agency opens up July 1st at 12 p.m. Eastern. So noon Eastern, free agency becomes a thing in the Wild West, which is one of my favorite times of the season when it comes to being an NHL fan, a hockey fan. Um, it it can get crazy. There's always generally a lot of crazy a few crazy deals out there that come about that you really just never saw coming. And that's kind of where I'm gonna go into this a little bit with a couple, and by a couple, I mean a few guys that I've kind of written down here as individuals that just me myself feel are noteworthy, potential for possibly fitting the type of player that Kevin Adams or the Sabres might be interested in to bring into this current roster to bolster it and bring it, over the line finally for next season, which is a playoffs make or break season, of course. And just, how realistic is it that they would be trying to sign these guys? What I would open this up with is I do think Kevin Adams wants to improve this roster this offseason. I mean, that's only natural. I think there are things he wants to do to bring in players for this current roster to bolster it and improve it because yes, they were only 1 point off, but there's clearly things that need to be done. I do think, of course, goaltending is something that's going to be still evaluated, although I do think they're comfortable with Levi and UPL, but it's still not like you couldn't improve that because you want to try. If you're trying to make the playoffs and you're trying to do something about it, you probably want something a little bit more steady in net than a first time full season rookie. And then a guy who's just going to go into his second ever season at the NHL level in UPL. And it's like, you could probably use something a little bit more dependable and reliable back there. So, how that happens though, I don't know if it's necessarily free agency. And the other thing, by the way, is a top four defenseman, preferably right-handed shot that can add a veteran grit element to this already very promising, but also somewhat young defensive core, especially with the top end guys like Dahlin and Samuelson who are together and they're your top pair, but then Owen Power and who can be that right side defensive pair with Owen Power. That's where the right hand shot, of course, comes into play. I don't think it's make or break, but at the same time, I wouldn't want four lefties as your top four. So I don't think Kevin Adams is also in that world. So I do think that there's a spot to be had there. Forwards, of course, could be had. You can shuffle things around. You're also probably going to still realistically see outbound individuals such as like Olofsson and maybe even one or two more, depending on moves that need to happen to do whatever it is that Kevin Adams wants to do. So then this is the opportunity where maybe you can backfill those roles like that third line right winger, which I will get into in a second here through free agency and hopefully a more cost friendly way than splashing crazy cash on days one or two and then just figuring it out from there. So I think there's a plan in place. I think Kevin Adams is doing things. I just don't think free agency is the only place. But since that is the thing that's coming up, you have to wait no more. I'm going to kind of go through a few guys that I have my eye on and just think that would fit the bill when it comes to what potentially the Sabres would be looking for in the free agent pool and would fill a certain role. I'm going to start with defensemen, though. So I'm going to start with defensemen that are available. I'm going to start with individuals in the defensive free agency right now. The first name has to be the top guy because he's probably the top free agent available this offseason, and that is Dmitry Orlov. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on him. I would say that if Kevin Adams wants to kind of swing for the fences in free agency and he wants to really secure that top four guy who can absolutely be a beautiful combination with Owen Power and give you very, very, very high end defensive work on that second line with Power, and do all the things that you need him to do, and only be at the age of 31 and bring a veteran presence. He has won a cup and everything like that. All of these boxes that you would like that player to be, he checks, but it's going to come at a serious cost. That is where Orlov is. Why I would say I don't really expect this one, and I'm going to do quick scores of chance of signing, in my opinion, on these guys. Where I don't expect it or I would be surprised. I do think Buffalo has the cap to afford it, potentially. We do have to see, with all of these things in mind, July 1st, it sounds like we are expecting a 10 million extension over 8 years for Dahlin. I think it was 10 or 10 and a half. I believe it actually was for Dahlin. And there is the question with Owen Power going into his last year on what his extension will be. Will it be a bridge deal for something like 6.5, 7 mil, maybe even approaching potentially 8 mil? I don't expect that if they do a bridge deal, but a bridge deal like 3 years, similar to what Darlene did, or are they just going to go all in, give him a max 8-year deal at whatever number is agreed upon? Once that happens, I think it's better to understand. With that in mind, though, I'm going to go into it assuming that Owen Power is going to get some sort of extension. So you have to keep that all in mind. That's where I really feel like, unfortunately, it prices yourself out of the premium kind of free agent contract that you would have to give someone like Orlov. I don't think Orlov is going to be an outrageous number. It's just the free agent market. If you're a premier player in the free agent market, you are at a great spot because you're most likely going to get your cost inflated. Your agent is very happy because you are looked at as the best of the available, and therefore you can drive that number up. I don't know if it's something that Kevin Adams is going to want to do. It would be really cool. I just don't fully expect it. The chance I have this of signing is just 3 out of 10. I'm not going to rule it out completely, but it would shock me a little bit. I do think top four defenseman is definitely on Kevin Adams' mind though, and that's why I kind of bump it up just a little bit to 3 out of 10. The next guy though, Matt Dumba. This is probably the one I'll spend a little bit more on or equal to. I just realized now I've spent a good chunk of time on Orlov, even though I said I wouldn't. But Matt Dumba checks also a lot of similar boxes, not quite as high end as Orlov, but a lot of similar boxes. He's a right-handed shot. He's top four talent and everything like that. He can play minutes in that top four position. He plays very physical. He's only 6 foot even and everything, but he's an extremely physical guy. We saw it even in this past playoffs, everything like that. He is an incredible force back there. He's a leadership style guy as well. He wore the A for Minnesota the past 2 seasons. He did have a slightly down season last year, which is interesting. So I'm curious to see what that does, if that affects his market at all, because you have something like that. You would want him to pair with Owen Power and pair him with that. And hopefully maybe you could drive that price down. But then at the same time, he is only 28 years old. He is in the middle of the prime of his career when it comes to age. And therefore, you would expect him to still go for a decent cost. The reason he's not going back to Minnesota is just because the buyouts of both Parise and Sutter for them are bumped up. And then Matt Boldy for them as well is going up to a $7 million price tag after the extension he signed last year. And they are in a very, very, very tricky cap situation right now. So they just can't afford to bring back a guy like Matt Dumba. I believe he's coming off of a contract right now that had him around 5 to 6 mil. I want to say it was 6 million. It wouldn't surprise me to see him get something similar. I wonder if it would probably maybe even go down to 5 million. Matt Dumba for say 4 years at 5 mil. So 4-year, $20 million contract. I don't know if that's what it is. I don't know what his value is, things like that. I'm not the kind of guy that really dives deep into comparables and things like that. I haven't gone through and scoured all current contracts among defensemen. So I'm just throwing out numbers. Do not hold me to these, please. But in my mind, in a vacuum, I would be willing to do that for someone of his talent, skill, leadership, and everything. Like he just fits a mold very, very well. And I get this feeling like he's the kind of guy that Kevin Adams was even kind of just keeping tabs on by around the trade deadline just to see if he was going to hit free agency and everything like that, like what Minnesota's doing, especially with dealing with them when he was trading for Jordan Greenway. Maybe conversations were had about what it would take even then to bring in a Matt Dumba, because it seems like he's the kind of guy and mold that Kevin Adams would like on this roster. I gave the chance of signing of him a 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10, not 7 or 8 even, only because it's not like I'm sitting here saying confidently I know anything. So this, for what it's worth, is the highest rating I gave any of these individuals. Um, just because I think he checks a lot of boxes. He won't be overly too expensive, like at an absolute premium cost, like an Orlov, and seems to fit the kind of mold and type that a Kevin Adams and Don Granato would love to have on this team at that top four Owen Power pairing, just right-handed defenseman. It just checks a lot of boxes. So I like that idea. Last and least, I'm going to be real short and simple because he fits what I like, but I don't find it realistic at all. Radko Gudas. I just think he's a free agent. If for whatever reason Florida is just not wanting to bring him back, that's where maybe the interest would increase a little bit. Leadership through the roof, just an absolute beast when it comes to the physical nature of his game. I do think he is not the most perfect defenseman anymore at his age and everything like that, but what he could do for power in the locker room, and then just the recent cup run he just made, all of that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot to like with him. It would make sense as a player. I just don't think it actually will happen or make sense at all. I only gave this one a 2 out of 10 when it comes to chance of signing, but just a noteworthy name out there that is a unrestricted free agent that checks a lot of boxes, at least as a player and individual in my mind. So that's defenseman. Real quick, going into forwards here. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's in the thumbnail here. I'm not going to go into crazy detail. Patrick Kane is a free agent. And let me just kind of like go through it real quick. Would it be really cool to see one of, if not the best, US born hockey player in the history of the National Hockey League come back to his hometown in Buffalo and play for us and help us kind of with this new build, kind of get us over the hump, get into the playoffs, and do everything he can when it comes to his leadership skill and all of that kind of stuff. And just in this time that he can for us. Yes, absolutely. It'd be awesome. Um, do I think that he still has game in him and everything like that? I mean, he was over 20 goals scored last year on basically majority of an awful team in Chicago. Took him a second to get adjusted to New York. He had an okay regular season in New York. He kind of disappeared a little bit in the playoffs, but do I still think he has game in him for a year or two or so? Absolutely. I think Patrick Kane is going to be good till the day he retires, barring any crazy injury or anything like that. What I will say is, am I actually expecting him to in a situation where maybe another team such as Carolina or New Jersey or the Rangers, if they can figure out their situation. I do think so. The Rangers have a couple interesting things where they got to pay some younger restricted free agent, key players like Keandre Miller and so on and so forth, where I don't know, unless he takes a serious reduction in pay. And when I say serious, I mean really serious, but just comparatively, uh, it, can it happen? Yeah, for the Rangers, but will it happen? It seems like it's a pretty good coin flip 50-50 at best situation there. But if like the Devils are looking for a high end, winger for their team to bolster their scoring a little bit, or the Hurricanes who desperately need kind of like that superstar to really lean on. Sebastian Aho is incredible. I think he's awesome. Do I look at him as like a can take over the game superstar? It's a bit of a stretch. And then after him, they definitely need someone like that. So if the Sabres then become in a bidding war, I'll call it, with teams like that, do I think Kane will pick the Sabres over them? Most likely not. That's just my opinion, because overall, Patrick Kane is still trying to win another cup in his career. He's trying to do it. He wants another cup, things like that. He's at the very tail end of his career now at this point, still game in him. I just don't think it's super realistic that he's going to come to Buffalo, but I'm not going to rule it out entirely. And also, I would love to see it. So overall, I gave this one a chance of signing 4 out of 10. Um, I don't think the Sabres go into a bidding war with anyone, but if Kane's not really seeing a number that he likes from anyone else, and maybe the Sabres can give him $1 to $2 million more than anyone else, maybe he does come and maybe he does play for the Sabres and he can play for the hometown team and try to do what he can for us on the wing and bolster this lineup. Love everything about that. Another guy that I had in the thumbnail, and I'll be honest, it's because I created the thumbnail now going back before I inevitably had a little bit of a hiatus. It was an individual that I liked before both now the resigning of Okposo and Gergensons. But Miles Wood is an unrestricted free agent and is technically a local boy himself. But also just he was someone that I was kind of going into the assumption that I could see a reality where only one of Okposo or Gergensons were going to come back. And then from there, a hole is there perfectly filled for a Miles Wood. So say it was Okposo that comes back and Gergensen didn't, then you put in Miles Wood for Gergensons. You put Jordan Greenway, in my opinion, on the opposite wing on that fourth line. And boy, that's a beautiful line, in my opinion. Or even if you have Krebs there with then Okposo and Miles Wood on the wings, whatever you're doing in that situation, Miles Wood to me, a massive physical engine that this team could absolutely use, who does have a little bit of scoring to him. I mean, he seems to love to score against the Sabres for one, but overall, I think there's a lot to love about his game. That all being said, now with both Okposo and Gergensons being re-signed, and then on top of it, Wood does appear to be a guy to me that, kind of will test the waters maybe a little bit, but then inevitably come back to New Jersey and give them kind of like a first chance at matching, we'll call it. And just because he loves, one, he's in a leadership role there, and two, he's a very key guy for them and everything like that. And he absolutely looks like he enjoys his role on that team. Most likely to me, it sounds like Miles Wood to me, even if Okposo and or Gergensons didn't come back, Miles Wood was probably kind of guy just overall I thought would inevitably come back to New Jersey. So chance of signing to me is another 4 out of 10. I wouldn't rule it out because he checks. I think there's a lot to like about his game, and he's still not, he's still got plenty of years on him. I just don't know if it's kind of one that I see Kevin Adams looking at. The one guy in the forwards that intrigues the hell out of me in free agency, and I find very interesting because if this team, being Toronto, wasn't dealing with so much going on with their high end talent, with Matthews, with Nylander, with Marner, and all of that kind of stuff, and they got to figure out those contracts and what they're going to do for those guys, I would think that this guy would go back to Toronto. But with them dealing with all of that, I don't see the path of a guy like him going back to Toronto with potentially the 3 to 4 to whatever $1 million you're going to have to pay him. And therefore, um, they're just going to have to try to fill his role with, Niles or a rookie of some kind or someone on a cheaper deal just to hopefully get the production out of him. And that's Michael Bunting. And Bunting intrigues me also as an individual, not just because of his situation, as he has 2 years in the league, both of which he scored 23 goals. He had a total of 49 points last season in 82 games. He had a total of 63 points in only 79 games 2 seasons ago. And he was almost like the perfect combination of offense and physicality when on the ice, sharing the ice with elite guys such as Matthews, Marner, Nylander, whoever he ended up on the ice with. He was that perfect kind of complement winger to those individuals. And watching him and how he plays and how he can produce out there, even though he's not what you would call an elite shooter or an elite skillful guy, I think there's a lot to love about him and his game. And if you picture someone like him going into a spot that I think is the weakest spot overall when it comes to lines on this team, this Sabres team, and that is the third line, the third forward line, weakest part of the Sabres last season by far, in my opinion. I think the goaltending at times, of course, was really suspect. I think defending as a team and then the defensive core as a whole at times was not great. But I think where it really was consistently letting down the team, or the one line and area that was consistently from start to finish letting down the team, was that third line unit. And I don't even fault it for the center who was there for the majority of the time, Casey Middlestat, because Casey Middlestat, one, has the metrics to back it up that he had an incredible 5-on-5 season. But then also you could see that he was doing the best with what he had. And then all of a sudden he finally had the opportunity to move up to the first line with how well he was playing on the third line once Tage Thompson was hurt. And he was producing incredibly well at that first line and looked awesome because his skill is incredible. And the key to that everything is Middlestat, and his skill is incredible. Take away Olofsson, who I think is a massive problem, and I do expect to see Olofsson, moved out this offseason via trade somewhere. There are teams that will definitely like the skill of Olofsson. Kind of shout out Calgary a little bit. They could use a guy such as him, and there's clearly guys that want out of Calgary, it sounds like, due to them not re-signing or signing an extension with them, or just are unhappy with their situation. But you move out Olofsson on that right wing, and then you bring in a Michael Bunting on that right wing. And I think the look of that third line is a lot better when it comes to both ends of the ice. And I think the production could be there. And I even expect Middlestat to be able to build on that with someone like a Michael Bunting on his wing. I think there's something intriguing about that. There's something intriguing about Michael Bunting and him as a player. And I think there's a lot to like about him. And it's just, I have no idea what the cost would be, though, for him. I don't even want to remotely speculate, because last but not least, he was on a less than $1 million a year, 2-year contract with the Leafs and had an unbelievable production, but also, again, was out there with the likes of Matthews, Marner, Nylander a lot of times. So it's like, what is his value? What is it? That's where I don't know, but I'm looking at him just strictly as a player. It is free agency. The numbers could be all over the place. Overall, the chance of signing to me is a strict even 5 out of 10. There, you get a lot of tape of him if you're the Sabres and Granato and Kevin Adams. He does, to me, feel like a Kevin Adams and Granato kind of winger, or at least something that they would like to bring in. And overall, I think if they're looking to bolster the forward line with a forward in the free agency pool, I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, you have a guy like Kane out there. I bring up Miles Wood. There's other individuals out there. I think Jason Zucker is just someone randomly I'll throw out there who is kind of a scoring style winger that could potentially help this team. That's a veteran presence and everything like that, with still some game in him. But overall, Michael Bunting is someone that it just intrigues me enough that I want to give him a little bit of respect and kind of acknowledge him as a free agent and potentially as someone that the Sabres could really use and would be great for this team if they were to take a stab at him. So those are the three forwards I have. And real quick, goalies. Goalies are not a position I expect Kevin Adams to address at all in free agency. If Kevin Adams, just to be blatantly honest, if Kevin Adams were to do something for this roster and this team, when it comes to the goaltending, and bring in someone to maybe pair with Levi or whatever the plan might be, I think it would be more via trade, and just see if there's someone else out there that a team is trying to just move on from due to contract situation, whatever it might be. And you can just get them in at a number that's not too unreasonable, but is a guy that you can lean on instead that way, rather than paying for whatever it is you're going to get with a goalie. But just one guy I want to bring up real quick, just because he's been a real steady Eddie for the past few seasons, even though the team he has played for has kind of had a lot of ups and downs. That is Simeon Varlamov. Just if you're trying to kind of replicate that veteran, steady, know what you get type of goaltender to bring into here and kind of just have in your back pocket if you need, just, if UPL's having some downtime and or Levi's having some downtime and you need to bring in a guy like that, it makes sense to me. He's not going to kind of screw you up. He doesn't really ever have blow up. His numbers kind of back it up, where he is exactly what he is. He can be a reliable, dependable veteran guy to bring in if you need, when you need it. But again, I don't expect free agency to be where Kevin Adams addresses this position if he does at all. So therefore, I only gave this chance of signing 2 out of 10. Just a name kind of a throw out there because he kind of fits a similar mold to like a Craig Anderson to me. If you're trying to just do something via free agency to fill that style role rather than via trade to get someone that's a little bit more dependable and so on and so forth. So I'm excited for free agency. These are just a few guys I'm looking at. Realistically, if I had to pick one thing that I expect the Sabres to do in free agency, one thing that they will sign to address with this current roster for the season coming up, I would actually say it's for a third to fourth line winger or first third to fourth line forward, we'll call it. Because I know they like to move some guys around. Krebs you could find on the wing or at center. Gergensons could play center, whatever you want to do there. I would expect your bottom six forward potential signing to be there. That's why kind of Michael Bunting was that idea to me. In free agency, that is the type of individual you're not going to go crazy and overspend for, but you can find a real good quality guy potentially, such as a Michael Bunting, or if there's anyone else out there that they like that could also fit a similar dollar amount and stuff. You don't have to break the bank for essentially to do so. I think you would have to potentially do that for Kane. I'm very intrigued to see what inevitably happens with Kane. Hopefully next week, not to start the closeout here, but hopefully next week, not only will the Sabres have done something in free agency, so we have some fun to talk about when it comes to the direction that this roster and lineup is looking now with the free agents period started and then an inbound player coming here, maybe even trades hopefully during free agency so that they can better get things directed. But I'm also going to be intrigued to see what Kane and other individuals go for, such as Orlov, just because those are kind of market setters. Those are the guys that once you see those, then individuals will trickle and fall be after them. So I'm excited for free agency. Like I said, it's one of my favorite times of the season. I love it so much just because I look forward to the one or two signings that are completely out of left field. Honestly, when Okposo got signed all those years ago for the Sabres, to me, that one kind of came out of nowhere. And so 4th of July weekend, I'm always generally out of town. I go visit some friends up in the great Northeast of the United States. And I was kind of in an area where cell service and, internet wasn't the greatest, and all of a sudden on TV you just hear about Okposo, and it came out of left field for me, and it was kind of just a cool thing to see the Sabres go and sign an individual at the time that was, a line mate of Tavares and was putting up points, and he was one of the bigger marquee names of the free agent pool at the time. It was cool out of left field and stuff like that. So I look forward to that kind of stuff. I look forward to Saturday when the market opens up. I look forward to this weekend. Everyone, I really hope you enjoyed this episode, but also please enjoy your 4th of July weekend. It's the premium time of the summer. Go out there, enjoy it however you want to, however you like to. I will be sure to enjoy it myself. And after enjoying that, I will be back with you guys next week for yet another episode of Sabres Chat. And then following that, real quick, Josh, my co-host with Bill's Chat podcast, as well as Bill's Chat Live, and I are planning on coming back next week, Friday, for our Bills Chat live show. It's been a few months since we've been live on air. A lot has happened with the Bills, of course. A lot has happened with us. We're going to have fun with that one. And we're excited to get back live shows. We're excited for the interaction and everything like that with you guys. We missed you guys, everything like that. We're recharged. We're ready to go. Bill season's around the corner. Sabres season is really feeling like it's around the corner as well, of course. Everything's in motion again. This sports lull hopefully will be coming to an end sooner rather than later. It's an absolute pleasure to be here for the last time. I am Luka, and this is Sabres Chat, presented by Built in Buffalo. You all have a great rest of your day and cannot wait to see you next week. Take care.